This is a very special episode recorded live at the Gamma Phi Beta convention. Jessica Bujanowski from our True Connection segment is filling in for co-host Lex Stewart, who is unable to be with us in person. Anything can happen with a live recording, especially when our guest invites her colleague, Amanda Lee, to join the interview. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the True and Constant podcast. It's so exciting to be doing this live. I'm Emma Remus from Gamma Tau chapter at St. Louis University.
And I'm Jessica Bujanowski from the Zeta Xi chapter at the College of Idaho.
And today, for this very special live recording, we are joined by University of Southern California Beta Alpha chapter sister, Cary Singleton.
Thank you.
Cary is absolutely incredible. She is the co-founder, vice president, and director of the Singleton Foundation for Financial Literacy and Entrepreneurship. She herself is an entrepreneur, a TEDx speaker, writer, and so much more. She has such a beautiful story, and we are so excited to share it today. Well, Jessica, how are you doing? And then Cary, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. It's great to be here.
I'm doing pretty good too.
That's awesome. So Jessica, why don't you start us off?
Yes. Cary, it has been so wonderful getting to know you this week. Not everybody has had that opportunity to do that. Let's get started by learning a little bit more about you as a human and then you in the professional world as well.
Let's see, as a human, I showed up on the planet almost 70 years ago to wonderful parents. I was very fortunate to have wonderful parents. My mother was studying to be a concert pianist at USC, and she saw my father's had the best car on campus only because his father was an upholsterer and had bought some right after World War II. And so my dad couldn't afford to go to USC, so he went on the GI Bill. And the long and short of it was he had the best car on campus, so he drove George Tire Biter around during the rallies. And my mom saw the car. She saw the Phoenix license plates where her family had moved. She saw this very handsome man, and she said, I want to, who is that guy? And her sorority, she was a Gamma Phi, her sorority sister said, oh, that's Roger Stewart. And she said, oh, well, my mom said, well, I'd like to get a date with him. And her sorority sister said, oh, Joyce, you could never get a date with him. He's a big man on campus. And my mother drew herself up and said, not only am I going to get a date with him, I'm going to marry him.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. 2 weeks later, there was an exchange between his fraternity and my mother's sorority, which is Gamma Phi. And he happened to be the president. And this is the one part of the story that's always embarrassing to me because I was raised to never think of myself particularly as male, female, or this path is only open to you or that path. But anyway, with all the guys behind him in the house, he called over to the house phone, which fortunately was picked up by the sorority sister who had been at the car. And he said, we're having an exchange in 2 weeks. Who's the prettiest girl in your house? And she started to say, well, that would be Joyce. That would be Joyce. Joyce Canavan. Yeah, that'd be Joyce Canavan. And he turned around to his fraternity brothers and said, anybody here ever heard of Joyce Canavan? And yeah, she's pinned to one of, to Bill in our house. And she overheard that, the gal or sister overheard it, and she said, oh, you know what? They're not pinned. They kind of act like they're pinned because they're both musicians. And anyway, so they're not pinned. No, that's definitely who you want to have be your date. Fast forward 2 weeks, they have a great time. They go out. And the next part of the story is kind of telling because she starts to order a drink. This is after the party. And I hope you don't drink because I would never marry a woman who drinks. We'll have 2 Cokes. She reaches into her purse to get cigarettes out, and he glances over and he says, and I hope you don't smoke because I would never marry a woman who smokes. She gets up, goes to the restroom, drops her cigarettes in the trash can, and 2 years later, they're married.
Wow.
Now, the reason that that's kind of important is I'm here because of Gamma Phi.
Yes,
you are.
I'm here because a sorority sister thought enough about her sister to help make that thing happen. So that goes back. My mother decided not to become a concert pianist. She married my dad, and they decided to go into business together. And that was life-changing for us. Very quickly, they were very good at what they did. They were sales reps for national companies around the country in the defense industry. And a few years into it, the major customer, who was in Tucson, said, "I'd like you to be our main manufacturer's rep, and we'll give you some more customers." So overnight, we went from being employees to being entrepreneurs. Their office was in my parents' bedroom with a card table. And a year or two after that, they got a huge contract, all the DC 789's oxygen tanks that dropped down.
Ooh, wow.
And instead of buying a fancy car or going on vacation, they put us in private school out in Pasadena. Life-changing. And 3 years later, we bought that company in Tucson.
Wow.
Life-changing. Yeah.
Full circle moments all around.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible.
And working together, the partnership that they had, we grew up with that partnership, just understanding. We talked business at dinner. We knew what deals they were working on as kids. And it's a great way to grow up. I highly recommend, if you're going to raise a family, put your dining room in your library and let your kids jump up and down when there's a question about something, and look in the yearbook, and later on they'll be looking at the Britannica or looking at the Globe. It brought our family together in a way that, to this day, we Zoom every Sunday for an hour, 4 generations, with my dad, who's 95.
That's so impressive.
Who was here yesterday, by the way. He
That's
flew in
really
from
special.
from LA. Yeah.
I love it. Well, like you said, the reason we are all here today is because we're Gamma Phis, and you have a particularly unique and special story of how you became a Gamma Phi. And I'd love to share with our audience, especially the ones that couldn't be here today at convention, about how that came to be.
Well, I didn't want to be a sorority girl. I went to college right around Vietnam was just ending, and we'd been going through all the riots, and it was pretty crazy in California. And the last thing I would have ever thought of was being a sorority girl. And on top of that, I'm an introvert, and I couldn't even imagine it wasn't even on the table, to be quite honest. So fast forward 30 or 40 years later, I'm now 50 years old, and I'm a designer builder of custom homes and small hotels up in Oregon with my former husband. And it's dinner time, and I'm, winding up the day looking over drawings, and I'm there in my work boots, my khakis, and my work shirt, and grubby fingernails. And my mom calls from Tucson, and she's so excited. My older sister, who's a violinist and a conductor, who had also never joined the sorority, she said, "Your sister's going to become a Gamma Phi." What? "Yeah, your sister's going to become a Gamma Phi at convention. I'm so excited. It's just so exciting. I've always wanted this for her." And I can tell she's pretty excited about it. So without thinking, I said, "So, Mom, if I wanted to be a Gamma Phi, could I?" "Oh my God, let me call Alcina right away. I'll see if I can get you in time for convention. Maybe Una May can be your guide." Oh, and she hangs the phone up. And I'm up in Oregon on my drafting table going, oh my God, I just became a sorority girl.
It's that easy.
I love it.
And the interesting thing that happened was at convention, because I lived in Oregon, University of Oregon, Oregon State, both asked, "Would you like to be in our chapter?" And I said, and I've learned in life, when words come to you, just say them, even though it may sound stupid. I said, "Well, actually, I'm thinking about USC. That's in Los Angeles." And everyone was like, "Why would you go to USC in Los Angeles?" I said, "I just have a funny feeling I'm going to be spending a lot of time there." And 6 months later, I walked out of a marriage that was a wonderful marriage, except for one thing. He was a prescription drug addict, and I'd hidden it for 15 years. And he unfortunately OD'd. And I realized in a small community, I would never get another job again. And so I left and came to USC.
Oh my gosh, that's so brave. I can't even imagine being in those shoes. How, if I could really quick interject, would you tell women, or what advice would you give women to assess if they're in a situation that isn't working for them, and how to change it and when to change it?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I probably should have changed it 2 weeks after I got married. And to be quite honest, I wasn't strong enough. And I do encourage people to really, if you're in a situation that's not healthy, get professional help. Let your family know. My family had absolutely no idea because I was too embarrassed, because I had left my business with them to marry this guy. And although I learned a tremendous amount, I love designing and building, every day I was afraid somebody would find out. And I was the one who had invested all the money in all of the properties that we owned. So it turned out to be a very big life learning and expensive lesson. And I highly recommend you don't go through it if you don't have to.
Yeah, that's truly inspiring. It's so hard. I mean, I think from all the inspiring women I've met this whole week, I think that we can put ourselves in boxes sometimes, and it's hard to release ourselves. But the fact that you had the courage to do that is just wonderful.
Cary, I'd like to know, as you have had these transformational moments, you said, I'm moving to LA, I am becoming a Gamma Phi Beta. What did that look like then? Your mom was a Gamma Phi Beta. What did she teach you about Gamma Phi growing up? What did you know about Gamma Phi?
She didn't teach me anything about it, quite. I mean, really, when I look back on it, she never said, I'm disappointed that you didn't join a sorority. I think she realized I wasn't the kind of person who would have joined a sorority. The interesting part about that is that when I came to Los Angeles, the class I got into, I had to write about someone who was well known, and I decided to write about a golfer, Babe Zaharias. And I see a few heads shaking, and I decided to make a very fun kind of romantic comedy about her. So I had 8 hours to design the story between having just been accepted and driving to USC. And there wasn't enough time to get to my aunt's house, but I had put a golf bag in the front seat of my 2-seater car so that I'd have something to prompt me. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't know Una Mae very well, but I called her up and I said, can I leave my golf clubs at the sorority while I go to class tonight? And she said yes. And when I came back, we started talking, and the next thing I knew, I was on the House Corporation Board. Just like that.
Like magic.
And the cool part about that group of women became my friends, because almost everybody at USC was, like 40 years younger than me, including the professor. And because I had to force myself to get to know people, the house was one place where I didn't have to force myself. And it was the first time in my life, quite honestly, that I had female friends. I'd always had one or two, but it was the first time that I actually became comfortable being around women, which it was huge for me.
Yeah, I have to say, I think, it's interesting. When I was growing up, I had gotten a lot of advice of, maybe male friends are better and women are competitive and, stay away from that. But that never really felt right. And I think there's something to be said for finding your people and going through that shared experience, even if you're maybe in a different generation than your cohort. So that's something I think is very valuable about the sorority experience. But I did want to ask you, so it seems like you've made a lot of great connections through Gamma Phi Beta. You mentioned Una Mae and Alcina, I know you're friends with. So can you share a little bit with our audience about who they are and how they uplifted you in certain ways?
Well, my mother's pledge sister was Alcina, and I had met her a couple of times. Both my parents became very well-known USC people. They're both alums of the year. So there was at least once or twice a year, there was some kind of an event where I came down from Oregon, and usually Alcina was a trustee at USC, so she usually was part of that group. So I didn't really get to know her, but I knew of her, and I knew that and she was always impressed me as just being so present, so immediately embracing. And same with Una Mae, so just immediately embracing. And as I said, for me, it was a very new experience. I've worked in what are traditional male industries my entire life, and usually the only woman in the room, whether the room is 5 people or 200 people, often just there might be one or two. That's really changed a lot. But during my lifetime, very few female engineers, very few women that were builders. It was just very rare.
Very male-dominated field.
Yeah.
Yes.
So for me, this is a whole new experience that I'm still kind of experiencing.
Yeah.
And I just think it's very cool. And I encourage you, if you know people who weren't in sororities, but would have been, but now maybe are people who network in their community or something, please encourage them. It's an amazing experience.
Snaps to that.
Absolutely. I wanted to go deeper on that, Cary, in talking about that lifting each other up, bringing them in, bringing others into our sisterhood as well. I have found within the sisterhood that opportunity to connect with women of, I'm really interested in this area, or I need some help learning about XYZ, or I want to get to this thing in my life. And I have found that my sisters have helped me through those areas, learning about leadership, learning about career development. Have you had folks help you, or have you helped others, really grow personally or professionally, mentoring, coaching, and what does that look like?
Well, I have done a lot of that, not necessarily through the sorority, although quite honestly, in preparation for this, I've watched 2 of the 4 podcasts that have happened so far.
Love it.
And one of them, because I want to find out what tricky things you guys were going to do. And I wish I could I think the gal's name is Lynn, but I might have that wrong. But the one of them is a children's author.
Oh, yes. Yes, Shelley. Yeah, she's great.
Shelley. Okay.
Mhm.
And what's interesting about that is I just 2 weeks ago signed a deal with a 17-year-old to animate a children's book video. It's actually a video about my cats that I wrote years ago. I shelved all my romantic comedies. I shelved almost everything when I met my husband so that we could start our life together and build new houses and start doing lots of other things. And I just happened to have dinner with her parents, and I hadn't seen her since she was 10. And I met her when she was 10 because she heard about the foundation, and she wanted to have a show called Minnow Tank, where the adults, like Shark Tank, but the adults,
Yes.
but the
This is
adults have
wonderful.
to pitch the children, the kids. And she came over at 10 and did a whole presentation. So that's the only time I'd ever met her. And I still haven't met her in person since then, but her parents said that she loves to animate. She's really good at it. She's 17, and she had, LMU had just shut down the program, her internship for the summer, because they didn't have enough people. And my husband turned to me, of all things, and he said, why don't you have her animate the amazing adventures of Tomo and Miss Kitty? So this just happened like 2 weeks ago.
It's happening before our eyes.
So here you, and then I'm reading this podcast, watching this podcast, and I'm thinking, now there's a good example.
Yes.
Kind of scary, but maybe I could reach out to her and talk to her a little bit about her experience.
Great connection.
Yes, get it. Yes.
Yeah, so that's a great example of how if we allow ourselves to raise our hand and the worst that can happen is someone can say, forget it.
Oh, absolutely. The oh darns are always better than the what ifs.
Yeah.
100%. And this is a very accomplished woman. And to hear that you even had to work up a little courage to do it. I think if we can all take that.
There's something special too about our sisterhood. If you call and you say, I'm a Gamma Phi, there's that natural connection right away to learn more from each other as well. Cary, you talked about your professional world. Let's dive into that, Emma. Do you want to dig in a little bit more?
Absolutely. And I see for the people who aren't here with us today, we have a beautiful oyster and a pearl, and I'm just dying to know what the story is behind this little friend over here.
Well, it so happens when my husband and I met, we decided 20 minutes into our first date to start this foundation. He asked me what my legacy project was, and I said entrepreneurship, and I asked him what his was, and he said financial literacy, which I thought was really boring.
Exciting.
But here we are. We now have a foundation, and hopefully it's going to be, I'm not sure if you had an opportunity to understand this, but it's all available for free on your phone. So you can do it on your computer, but basically you can watch the videos, you can use Groove, you can do Slingshot and so forth and so on, all on your phone. No matter what age you are, by the way. And the reason I always say that is that one of the things we learned about a year or two ago is that 47% of all couples do not talk to each other about money. And that does not matter what economic status you're in. And they don't talk to their kids. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the reason we have so many problems financially, is because nobody's talking about, I don't know what a credit score is. How would I buy what's a point? What's a point? How would I buy a house? So anyway, so my deal is entrepreneurship. And the story I like to tell is we often hear in the last few years about how everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. And that they think they have to have some big idea, like, I'll just name something that's a big idea, but SpaceX, for example.
Something from Minotape.
Yeah. And it turns out that, they might have some amazing big idea that's life-changing or world-changing or whatever. But when I think about being an entrepreneur, what I want you to think about is this little story. I have a new friend. His name is Jamie Siminoff. He lives pretty close to me, and he is an inventor, and he works in his basement, and his wife usually answers the door upstairs if it's the FedEx package he's expecting. Is it a realtor that's just trying to give him a card? Is it her friend coming over for a cup of coffee or whatever? And one day she's out at the grocery store, and 3 times he's had to go up and down those stairs to find out that it's not the FedEx package he's expecting. And he is really getting ticked off. And finally, Jamie says, if I just had a camera on the doorbell, ding, ring. That's how the Ring camera was invented.
Well, I just learned something new today.
That's incredible.
Now, the reason I like to use Jamie's story is because it's like an oyster. An oyster gets something in its shell. Could be sand, could be a little piece of whatever.
Something irritating.
It's irritated, and it bugs it. And so what it does with its saliva is it works over and over and over trying to figure out, what am I going to do about this? And what it creates with the saliva is a pearl. Happens to also be something.
Something beautiful.
Something beautiful.
I thought that was pretty cool that worked out that way. That little pearl, the Ring camera, was sold to Amazon for somewhere between $1 and $2 billion.
Absolutely incredible.
Little irritating thing. He has to go up and down the stairs. If I just had a camera, ding, ring. Then Jamie realizes, if the neighborhood watch groups had cameras, if the police department had cameras, and all of a sudden he now has a string of pearls. Okay? So I love the story because if you want to be an entrepreneur, you don't have to go into space looking for how to get to Mars. You might want to. That's fine if you want to. But start thinking about what bugs you. That even sometimes just the smallest redesign of a doorbell could be your pearl. Could be your pearl.
Yeah, I think that to me is the most intimidating part. Like how to get that idea, how to find that idea. Were there any ideas in your own personal life as you've been going along in your own business ventures where you're like, oh, I don't know if that's going to work out, but you feel like it worked out?
For me, until I became a designer builder, I worked in the defense industry, and my job was to find out really what wasn't working. My first job was with Hughes Aircraft right out of college. They had a missile that wasn't flying, and of all things, they hired me.
They need the missiles for.
Yeah. I'm not an engineer, but they hired me because I was fluent in German. And this was a German translation program, German and French, French to Boeing, Germany to Hughes. French and German didn't speak to each other. Boeing and Hughes didn't speak to each other. This is old history, but anyway, they hired me to find the problem. And again, I will use this as an example. Sometimes the most obvious things that come to you, say them, look at them. Don't just say, that's too easy. So I asked my boss what I was supposed to do, and he said, well, we never had any professional translations because the engineers in the United States are just building the parts off the drawings. So just start doing some research. So I had to have secret clearance. I don't know to this day anything really about missiles, but I have secret clearance. Okay. So I start looking at the drawings. About 2 weeks into it, I notice the name of a vendor from Germany who's a customer of my parents' company. And I start to look away. Well, obviously wouldn't have anything to do with the problem of the missiles not flying, right? Wait a second. Why am I seeing their name on the drawing? And I look closely, and there was an English translation under the German, and one word was missing, and it was the word blue. And I suddenly go, oh my gosh, I think I know why the missiles aren't flying. This company makes desiccators. Desiccators are drying agents. Drying agents either are color changing. You've seen this with flowers even. They go from blue to pink when they get wet. Or they're not color changing, but they have what's called a humidity indicator on the outside. And it does the same thing. And it turned out that because they hadn't translated the word blue, they had put non-color indicating desiccant and no humidity indicator, and the missile rounds were getting wet. And that's why they weren't flying. So I'm not a genius, but I've learned when you see something or you hear a voice say something, go ahead and follow that instruction.
Jump into that. Yeah. See something, say something. Absolutely.
Yeah. Sometimes people will look at you kind of weird, but a lot of times you're getting that information, and that was the answer to that.
Mm-hmm. I want to briefly jump into financial literacy. We have just about 10 more minutes together, and this is really important. We were having some really great conversations about our young collegians, but also our alumni, our families, married couples who have kids, those who have older parents as we're aging. And so I wanted to kind of dig into that financial aspect. What are the first things, maybe let's take those three different segments. What is the first thing somebody should know about financial literacy as maybe a young adult, maybe as a married couple, and then maybe as we are a little bit later in life?
Amanda, do you want to answer that question?
Come on up here. Come on up.
I would normally never.
What we have happening.
But Amanda is our partner. She put the partnership together with Gamma Phi, and she's really the expert.
Thank you for joining us, Amanda.
Yes, this is our friend Amanda. Hi there.
So the first group, collegians, that's what you said?
Yeah.
Right? Pay attention. It's actually important. That's the first thing, honestly, because everyone's going to have a different money story and different money journeys, but actually pay attention to your money journey. It's really important, and it's never too early to start. And especially as you're thinking about the future, every little makes a difference. So if you actually start with a little bit now, it's going to help you way down the line in the future. Don't just think super present, but in the present, think future.
I wish somebody would have told me that when I first even graduated, because I will tell you, I waited a little too long to start saving for retirement. But then the next group, let's talk about maybe recently married or kind of in that like 30s, 40s, what's maybe something advice you'd give a married couple?
You know, we actually did an entire show called Heartbroke, and it actually focused on couples and financial journeys. Because Cary had mentioned it before, that the third leading cause of divorce is actually finance. It's money. So financial infidelity, like people hiding, keeping secrets about money, or not being on the same page about money. So if you don't want that to be your story, I highly encourage you to have that conversation with your partner. That's actually really important. I can personally say I'm engaged, and I remember into dating, like a probably third, fourth date, we started talking about credit score, student loans, what does the day-to-day look like? Because I wanted to understand not only where I was, but where was my partner. It's really important, especially as, you know, going back to that first recommendation of if you're not only thinking about the now, but the future, and the same with your partner.
I'm just going to jump in real fast to say this show is not actors. These are real couples. And over a 6-week period of
6
time,
weeks, correct.
They worked with a financial counselor. And I highly recommend watching these shows. Experian underwrote it. That's how important they thought it was. And this is a show for all ages, because what we've learned is it doesn't matter how much money you have or how little money you have or how old you are. If you're not talking to your partner about money, there's going to be a problem at some point, and it's going to be
it plays a huge part, whether there is a power imbalance in the relationship as it relates to money, whether you're arguing because you're not on the same page. Money beliefs and the emotional side of money really does play a crucial role into that.
That's actually like the biggest lesson that I think I've learned in my own financial literacy journey, is how deeply connected money is with emotions. And how a lot of people go, I'm not good with money, but a lot of it is also looking at how we process emotions. Now, so much of how we view money is tied to our very first memory about money, whether it wasn't having enough money, whether it was comparing to maybe someone like a classmate, a different social class. So I think that is a really big takeaway I've had. And I can imagine that ties in very well with your storytelling aspect of the foundation. How does that tie in storytelling, emotions, and financial literacy?
That's super significant. You know, as we were talking about heartbroke, they're all different types of relationships that are facing different struggles. And that's important to tell those different stories, because we are all unique with diverse backgrounds. And even going back to Jessica's earlier question about even couples, just even like, you know, if you're moving in together, you grew up differently, you maybe did laundry differently. And so having to like come together on that, or maybe you clean the home differently. So you both have different money stories and how you grew up with money. So now that's also another thing to kind of consider with that as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing this. If you could very quickly, because we're running out of time here, but that last age group, maybe our retirement age group, what piece of advice might you give them from a financial aspect?
I would lots of it. But it's never too late to have that money conversation or to change your beliefs, right? And then to also then pass that forward, because it's really significant to share that with everyone that's coming after you as well.
These are very helpful tips. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think we're at the point now that we need to wrap up.
We are jumping into one of the best segments of the podcast, our rapid fire questions. And I'm going to pull them up on my phone really quick. Amanda, thank you so much.
Let's give Amanda a round of applause.
All right, Cary.
Thanks, Amanda.
All right, here we go. Rapid fire. Are you ready? Are you excited? Okay. What gamified value resonates the most with you? Love, labor, learning, or loyalty?
I would say love. I would say that for a person who spent a lot of their time where I was comfortable, that learning to be a sister it's been about love.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's a great one.
All right. What has brought you joy this week?
Well, it's given me a chance to think a lot about my mom and seeing my dad here and having Alcina and Unime come up together and seeing Senda and some of my friends that I haven't seen in a while. I'm not as involved with Gamify as I was before I met my husband. And,
I'd say you're pretty involved.
yeah, but he came also. So
Another Gamify guy.
yeah, well,
Coming in the mix.
Don't tell him that. He won't even let it get his hair cut at a salon. So
Well, that brings us to our next one. What's something new that you've learned?
you mean this week or in general?
Anytime.
Oh well. We are big lifelong learners. A couple years ago, we decided to learn how to run boats, and so actually tomorrow I'm heading up to Canada. We are now 5 years into serious boating. We by ourselves took our boat up to Alaska
Ooh.
and back, and
Sounds
then
so fun.
on the way back we almost lost our lives. So I designed a new boat that was almost twice as big. And we still can run it by ourselves. And the joy in that is that we meet a lot of really cool people, but we also are learning skills and not saying, oh, just because we're this age, we can't do whatever. That's really important. And then we just started collecting classic cars
Wow.
a couple of years ago. And same thing, meeting fabulous people all over the country and getting very involved with encouraging a new automotive. Hopefully you may see some new automotive design where you actually can differentiate what kind of car it is.
Ooh.
Watch, next couple of years, you might see something.
You heard
Favorite-
it here, folks.
Favorite classic car?
I'm sorry?
Your favorite classic car?
Oh, you know what? That's like asking who your favorite child is.
Sorry. All right. You don't have to answer that one. But what is something that you would tell your college self?
I would tell my college self, I'm glad that something happened in my life that was life-changing. And the long and short of it is I was going to be an attorney my entire life. I was fortunate to get picked by the man who was head of the plumbers unit for Watergate to work with him on his disbarment. And after a week, he basically said, Cary, I know you're going to be an excellent attorney, but I don't think that's what you should be doing. I think what you should be doing is looking for problems to solve.
Mm.
And that has allowed me to go into multiple careers that other people go, how in the world did you get from here to here to here? But I thank Bud all the time. And I highly encourage people, no matter what age you are, if you get offered an experience like that was an experience for me,
Yes.
and take it. If it feels right, take it, because it may make you go do the thing you really wanted to do, or you may say, whoa, I didn't realize being a conductor or a trombonist or whatever it is, a chemical engineer. Now I know this is not really what I want to do. So
Look
that
for those open doors.
experiential learning, really big deal.
Yeah. Anytime there's a path, just keep making steps and it'll lead to the path that maybe you were meant to be on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so our next one typically is asked, what was the moment you chose Gamify? And we got to hear a little bit about your story. So I actually want to put a twist on it and ask, what was the first moment you realized the power of the Gamify Beta sisterhood?
Good question.
I would say it's when I joined the House Corporation Board. And at that point, we were meeting way more than we needed to. It was once a month. And I had met at Founders Day a young woman, about almost 20 years my junior, down at Beta Alpha. And I was in line for lunch, and she was standing behind me, and she said, can you believe there's people here like over 50 that are joining the sorority? And I turned around and I said, actually, you're talking to one. And this young lady's her heritage, is Thai American. Beautiful woman, dressed. She was a banker, dressed a beautiful suit, beautiful face. Just went through every emotion of trying to respond, and finally said, I don't know what to say. That's what she said. I don't know what to say. And I said, you could say, welcome, sister. Mm-hmm. And we hugged each other. and became very close friends. And we ate dinner. I asked her to join the House Corporation Board, and she came in from Pasadena, it's Elisa Champong. And I asked her we had dinner every month together and she's now the financial advisor for my stepdaughter. Yeah. And that's a moment when you realize, like, wow, this is what this could be.
Oh my gosh, so cool. Absolutely so cool. So our next question is one of my absolute favorites. It's a fan favorite. Jessica, want to finish this off here?
Yes. If you could nominate any person in the whole world for membership in Gamma Phi Beta, who would it be?
Well, I'd like to say Amanda, but we haven't talked about that.
Was this an ask right here?
I will mention someone else that I had the fortunate to have dinner with recently, who I think is an absolutely phenomenal person, and I think invokes all of the things that we're talking about here at Gamma Phi, and that's Condoleezza Rice. Yeah. She's just absolutely phenomenal, and I was fortunate to get to spend some time with her a few weeks ago, and just remember thinking, she is in another sorority, so we don't have an option there, but
we can dream, can't we?
But she very much. I was actually thinking about her today because I knew this question was going to come up, and I want to make sure she was actually already in another sorority. But I was looking at, again, remembering what she had shared at that dinner and thinking about this is the kind of womanhood, personhood that I hope we all aspire to.
Wow, she's a great addition. This composite's getting cooler and cooler with each episode. I love it. Well, thank you all, friends, for joining us. Cary, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom. What a special time.
Hi, listeners. I'm Jessica Budjanowski, and welcome to our True Connection segment. It's your source for Gamma Phi Beta information, special stories of our sisterhood, and tools to get you involved. Connecting with Cary was truly a special experience for Emma and I, and we got to spend a little extra time with her to discuss financial literacy. And she shared more on our new partnership with our members that's going to really dig into financial literacy. Gosh, I wish I had known more about financial literacy when I was younger. Though we can always keep learning, right? Now, partnering with the Singleton Foundation is going to be a game changer for our sisters. So what does this look like? The goal is to make financial competence fun and engaging and accessible to all. The Singleton Foundation will be utilizing a couple of really incredible resources. These include the Million Stories. These are an award-winning video challenge that aims to break the taboo of talking about money. We also have Venture Valley. That's an award-winning video game that ignites aspiring business skills. And we also have Slingshot, an AI-powered app that makes it possible for anyone to create and build and share new businesses. And then we have Groove. It's a habit-building and learning app created with behavior science to build financial confidence and competence. Now, this partnership really holds great promise in equipping our members with the knowledge and the resources that they need to thrive personally and professionally. So be on the lookout for more information on this partnership. It's coming your way soon. I'm Jessica Budjanowski. Let's keep connected until next time.
True and Constant is brought to you by Gamma Phi Beta Sorority. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider giving a gift to the 150th by going to gammaphi-beta.org/150/podcast. Special thanks to our co-hosts, Emma Remus and Lex Stewart. Jessica Budjanowski for the True Connection segment, our editor, John Haight, and executive producers, Megan Kruger and Shauna Wilson. Our theme music, Panko Breaded Pork Chops, written by Michael Thomas Gager, performed and produced by Mikey Gager. Thank you for listening.